All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us at our live stream here on Facebook, Restoring Your Voting Rights Automatically in a lot of cases. I want to thank you all for joining us. My name is Joe Watson. I am the Communications Coordinator with American Friends Service Committee, Arizona. And I'm joined today by Tim Hinsey of the Rosenstein Law Group and his colleague, Steve Charbonneau, who is also a leader of AFSC Arizona's Reframing Justice Project.
Thanks, Joe. So I'm Tim Hinsey. I'm a criminal defense attorney at the Rosenstein Law Group.
I'm Steve Charbonneau. I'm a law clerk, and my admission is pending here at the Rosenstein Law Group. I do a lot of criminal justice advocacy work with the Arizona Attorneys from Criminal Justice and also with AFSC.
And with the election coming up, we just want to put this on so that we can talk about restoring rights and things like that to get as many people out to vote.
Well, fantastic, guys. I'm going to go ahead and share our rights restoration PowerPoint with folks.
Sure. Thanks, Joe. So basically what we're talking about here is people, if you've been charged, convicted of a felony, misdemeanor, things like that, there's some confusion on whether or not people can vote. So we want to clear up a lot of that. So how do we know if your rights are revoked? So the first thing, if you're charged with a felony, your rights are not revoked, right? A lot of people say you're innocent until proven guilty. I like to say you're innocent unless proven guilty. The until just sounds like it's as if it's inevitable. So if you're charged with the felony, you still retain your civil rights. That includes your right to vote. The next thing, if you have been charged with or even convicted of a misdemeanor or some sort of civil offense, a misdemeanor conviction is not going to take away your civil rights, such as your right to vote, your right to hold office, your right to serve as a juror. Some domestic violence offenses may affect your right to possess a firearm. We'll talk about that a little bit later here. If you are under investigation for anything, if it's a felony, a misdemeanor, I guess even a civil offense, again, you are innocent unless you are proven guilty. So you're not going to have any effect on your civil rights at that point. Now, when we go down to actual convictions, so if you're convicted of a misdemeanor, again, this isn't a felony, you're still going to have your right to vote. You're still going to retain your civil rights. Again, in some cases, there may be a loss of firearms, your right to bear arms. So the next that we're going to go to is if you've been sent to jail or if you are currently in jail. Now, this can get a little bit difficult here because if you're in jail pending a case, so you've been charged with a crime and you're currently being held at the county jail or something like that, you still have your rights. You have not been convicted. Now, and Steve can talk a little bit about that. There's been some push here. You have people in custody and how can they vote if they're currently locked up?
Yeah, and there's been some controversy. I know it's been in the news a lot about people who are in jail that haven't been convicted of a crime and they're not given the ability to vote. So while you still do have that right, if you hadn't lost the right previously or had it restored and haven't been convicted, it's important to remember as a pretrial detainee, you do have that right to vote still.
Right, and so that leaves us with, okay, so where are we sitting if our rights have been taken away? You've been convicted of a felony in Arizona. And so that conviction is going to suspend a number of rights. One, and what we're mainly here to talk about, your right to vote. You also have your right to hold public office. You have your right to serve as a juror on a trial. And you also have your right to possess a firearm. So those four are going to be your big ticket items there, your civil rights that are suspended when you are convicted. And we'll talk about that as a suspension. So Joe, if we can go to the next slide there. All right, so there's an application process. Let's say you've been convicted of a felony previously. There are kind of three prongs here. We have a set aside, which we don't have an expungement in Arizona, but a set aside is about as close as you can get to that. And with the set aside, the court would be setting aside the judgment of guilt. They dismiss the complaint or the information against you, and the person is released from all penalties. Now, all penalties and disabilities. Doesn't include the MVD or the Arizona Department of Transportation. That doesn't include game and fish. And there's a couple other things, because the courts have and the legislature have spread out a set aside of the judgment of guilt, a restoration of your right to own or possess firearms, and then your other civil rights, such as your right to vote, your right to be a juror. But in the application process, you can file the application and knock out all three of these, depending on the circumstances of your case. Now, there may be a situation where you are convicted of a felony that is not eligible for a set aside, and we have those on the screen here. So if you have a dangerous offense, you would not be eligible for a set aside. And that's something if you have a deadly weapon or a dangerous instrument, or if there was some sort of serious physical injuries. And you would know that looking at the sentencing documents in your case. If you were convicted of a felony and it says that this was a dangerous offense, then you would not be eligible for a set aside. The next thing we have, if it's a crime requiring sex offender registration, that would not be eligible for a set aside. If there was a crime involving sexual motivation, that would not be eligible for a set aside. If your victim was a minor under the age of 15, and then they have certain Title 28 offenses, and these ones are kind of odd. Local city traffic ordinances, you can't get set aside. Criminal speeding, hit and run, things like that. Reckless driving, you would be able to set aside. So there's certain parts of that where you'd be ineligible. Now, if you are going to apply to have it set aside, the court's going to look at a few different things. The nature of the circumstances of the actual offense and the conviction, your compliance, if you were placed on probation, if you did well on probation, the court will look at that. If you have any prior felony convictions or any prior convictions at all, or any subsequent convictions, the court will look at that, your age and the time that's passed. The second part of this, and this is a separate process, would be the restoration of your right to possess a firearm. And so there's a couple things here to take note of. So when we're talking about restoring the right to possess a firearm, one, if you were convicted of a dangerous offense, you are not going to be able to restore that right to possess a firearm. The other part is if there was a serious offense. If there's a serious offense, you're going to have to wait 10 years from the absolute discharge. That means if you were sent to the Department of Corrections, to prison, 10 years after you were discharged. If you were placed on probation, 10 years after you were terminated from probation. If it's any other felony, then, and it's not a serious offense or a dangerous offense, then you have 2 years from your absolute discharge. So again, Department of Corrections or from probation, then you can apply to have that your right to possess a firearm restored. So the reason why these are separate is technically to set aside a judgment of guilt as soon as you've completed everything. If you were placed on probation, you paid all your fines, you did your classes, whatever the court wanted you to do, then you can apply for a set aside. With the right to possess a firearm, though, you have to wait there. There's the 2-year time limit, or if it's a serious offense, 10 years, or if it's a dangerous offense, you just can't do it. The third part of this, and again, these are kind of piecemeal. So you can file an application, you can include all three in the application, or you can do one and not the others, depending on your case. So your restoration of civil rights. And this, we're kind of going to talk about this a little bit, because one, the big ticket item right now is your right to vote, right? Your right to sit on a jury, but the right to vote specifically. So there are two different things here. If you have 2 felony offenses, now that could be 2 felony offenses in one plea agreement, or if you went to trial and you were convicted. If you have more than one, then you can apply to have your rights, your civil rights, reinstated or restored. And so with that, you have to have completed everything, right? So if you have 2 or more, you have to file a petition. And so for all of these, the application, you can actually combine all of these in one, but there's a time limit here. So once you file that application, either to set aside the judgment of guilt, or if you're saying, I just want to vote, right? So I'm going to do the restoration of my civil rights so that I can vote in the upcoming elections in November. The state, the prosecutor, they have 60 days from the time that you file that application to file their response. And so what the rules say is within 10 days of you filing your application, that is going to be forwarded on to the correct prosecutor, and the prosecutor has 60 days. The court, in order to make a decision on the restoration of your civil rights, possession of a firearm, or the set aside, has up to 120 days since you filed the petition or the application to actually give you a decision on that. And you can request a hearing, and the hearing would have to be done within those 120 days. If we don't have our time limit here, it's working against us right now. 120 days, we're beyond that. So what we want to spend a little bit of time on is the automatic restoration of civil rights. And so with this, if you are a first-time felony, if you have a first-time felony conviction, and again, if you had a case where there were multiple felonies, let's say a few of them were dismissed, and you ended up with one felony conviction by way of a plea agreement, or if you were found guilty at trial, you may be eligible for an automatic restoration of your civil rights. Now, this is upon final discharge. So you were sentenced to prison, you went to jail, you were placed on probation. Once you have completed that, and you haven't been convicted of another felony, even if it's in the same, let's say a plea agreement, there's two felonies, you would not be eligible. But if it's only one, and you've paid, you've satisfied your sentence, and the other kicker is you've paid any restitution. So if there was a victim in the case and there's a financial restitution claim there, once you've paid that, then you're entitled for automatic restoration of your rights. What it doesn't include is your right to possess a firearm. But for our purposes here, there may be people out there that are eligible for an automatic restoration of their rights. And when I say eligible, it already happened, right? Your rights were restored and you may not know it. And so that's really a target audience here of people thinking, well, I was convicted of a felony and they told me that I was going to lose my rights, and I did. But the truth is, as long as you completed everything, you have your absolute discharge, then you have those rights back. You can vote. And so we don't have to wait the 120 days to fill out an application. Now, you can still file an application, and I would recommend it, to restore your civil rights, because every once in a while, the court won't send that notice to the proper people. But you would be within your rights if you have one felony conviction and no other felony convictions to register to vote by the deadline October 5th. So that's extremely important, because a lot of people think that, okay, I have to jump through these hoops. I have to give the state 60 days to respond. I waited a little bit. The court wants 120 days. That's 4 months. And people kind of get, disheartened and they give up on it. But if you are in that subset of people, you can actually get out and you can register to vote. And you can vote in the election on November, in November. And so the statute there, people have some worry about maybe going to register and someone realizing, okay, you have a felony conviction, so you are unable to register to vote. And so the knowledge is power, right? And if you look at the actual statute here, it's ARS 13, Title 13, Section 13-907. And when you look at that, it's a pretty short statute, and it will tell you if you have not been convicted of a felony offense prior to the one felony that you were convicted of, then you are eligible for that automatic restoration of rights. I see Joe's putting it up on the screen here. So again, only available to those with first-time convictions, as long as you paid all your restitution, your discharge from DOC and/or probation. Essentially, you have completed all of your requirements. You don't need to file for it. You don't need to fill out an application. You don't need to have your rights, your convictions set aside. You do not need to restore your right to possess a firearm. And you can go out and register it and vote.
Yeah, and one of the questions we get a lot is asking how how people can find out. People are uneasy about just taking that leap and registering when they don't have that piece of paper ordered from the court that says, yes, you can do this. And here's the thing: if you actually look at the statute, as Tim said, 13907, and what he kind of went over is that the statute itself, when you look at it, it looks like it's for all first-time felony offenders, and that's actually the way the language reads. However, there was a Court of Appeals opinion that came out and basically determined that what the legislature meant when they passed this is that they meant it for one felony offense only. So if you have one felony offense and it is your first felony offense, your right to vote is automatically restored by operation of law. And the courts have written about this in their opinions too. And what that means is you don't need an order. You don't need anything that says that you have the right to vote. It is by operation of law. It's well settled law, and it's something you're able to do. So if this applies to you, you have confidence that you can do this, that you can register to vote before the October deadline. And if you have any questions about it, we're going to have our information available. I think Joe's going to make that available in the chat. We have it in the slideshow as well. You can call our office. You can email us, whatever's more convenient for you. We're here to answer your questions. If anything, if you have questions, specifically tailored to your particular circumstance.
And remember, with that automatic restoration, we're talking about a felony conviction. If you've been charged with it, that's not what we're talking about here. You can still vote. And if you were charged with, let's say, 15 felonies, but it ended up that you were only convicted of one of those, it does not matter that you were charged with other ones. The conviction is the only thing that's controlling there, and your rights are automatically restored once you satisfy the terms of your sentence.
Great. Hey, thank you guys very much for that. I see that we have a lot of folks who belong to a lot of Facebook groups for families of loved ones who have a conviction history, who are currently incarcerated, who are here with us, some formerly incarcerated folks. So we'll get to those questions in just a moment. For those of you who do qualify for automatic rights restoration, I want to go over, I would assume your next question would be, oh, great. Now what do I do to register to vote? So let's go over that real quick. So how do you register to vote by October 5th, which is the deadline to do so? So as long as you're 18, a US citizen, an Arizona resident, and your rights have been restored, you can register to vote. What you're going to want to do is go to servicearizona.com. So you can see right here, here's the voter registration area to register online. It's a really, really simple process. So we'll click on that. You can choose whether or not to view this website in English or Spanish. This also happens to be the basically the MVD website where you go and register your car, get your driver's license, renew, etc. So we click on this. It here on the voter registration website, it tells you the upcoming important dates. Our November 3rd election and the voter registration deadline for that being October 5th. And then you begin the voter registration process. Here they ask you to check mark all of these things. If you can say yes to all of these things, then you can register to vote. And then you continue on with that. Okay, so as I said, you're gonna click on voter registration. As you do that, make sure that you have your social security number and your Arizona driver's license or ID card handy. You're going to then confirm or change your mailing address on file. Choose your party preference if you have one. Make sure that you sign up for permanent early voting. It doesn't mean that you are required to only vote by mail, but that makes sure that in all future elections, you will receive a ballot in the mail if you choose that as a more convenient way of voting rather than going to a polling place. Then choose whether you'd like to receive your voter pamphlet by US mail or email. Now, your voter pamphlet is different than your ballot. It basically tells you about all the initiatives that are on the ballot and gives you more information there. President is not the only thing that we'll be voting for in November. There are lots of important initiatives here in Arizona. There are folks at the county and municipal level that are trying to earn your vote. So make sure that you're well informed about everything on the ballot. And then once you do all that, you simply confirm your information and you click register to vote, and that's it. And you're ready. Let's go ahead and jump into some questions here. I'm going to, so Gabriela has really offered up a couple of issues here, gentlemen, that I hope you can clarify here. First of all, she says she's running into a lot of people who say they're unsure of how to even look up their records, and they feel as if they're not sure if the charges were dismissed, et cetera. I know you kind of touched on that a little bit before, but if you could maybe respond to that, I'd really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So the courts, if you go online and just go on to Google, right? The Arizona Supreme Court public access, right? Sometimes I type in Maricopa County public access and it'll pop up, right? And you can actually search for cases. If you know the case number, great, type that in there. Otherwise, you can search by name and date of birth. And if you do that, it'll pull up most cases in Arizona. And if you do that, you see the case number, you can click on it, you can see the parties to the case, find out if it's you, okay, that's me, or, you know, that's the family member or friend that I was looking for. And you may actually, in a lot of cases, and depending on the age of the case and also the type of case, you may be able to click and find minute entries for that case. And this is all online. You can do it from your personal computer. And if you look at the minute entries, you can go in and sometimes it takes a little bit of patience. And Steve and I can definitely help with that kind of stuff, because there's a lot of legalese, and you may pop it up and see 200 minute entries there. And we can kind of look and see which ones, but you'll find a sentencing minute entry, or you'll find a note that the case was dismissed. Sometimes you don't even need to get to the minute entries. If you look, you do the basic search and it'll have a disposition there. And you can see if the case was dismissed, or they'll have just some basic notes about the court dates. You can go on the Maricopa County docket and see the disposition of the case. So yeah, if you're one of those people and you're like, I lost the paperwork, I don't know, you can go online and try that. If that doesn't work, contact the court, get the clerk's office, and you can call them and say, hey, I need some records on this case. At the very least, I need to know what the disposition was, right? Yeah. And you can actually go in person. I've had to do this for older cases. I think the address is on Jefferson, where you go into this dark basement and you can actually go back and look at paper files. So there's definitely a couple options there. I would start with going online. That's the easiest one. And again, that's I always type in Maricopa County public access, but I think it's the Arizona Supreme Court public access. Start with a name, date of birth. And if that doesn't get you anywhere, call the court. Call the court if you know where it was out of, and see where you can find the records.
Yeah, and each court was going to have, definitely the superior courts in different counties have case histories that they can look up fairly easily if you just type the county and case lookup. And some counties like Maricopa make it really easy to actually access all of your court documents online too, so you don't have to wait for a public records request. So you're sitting there and you're like, well, I'd really like to see my plea agreement, and you can actually go to ECR online, to Maricopa County ECR online, and if it's your case, you can't go look up anybody's case, but if it's your case, you can actually have access to that information.
ECR is electronic court records, I think.
Yeah.
Great. Great. Thanks for explaining that. Yeah. So, I mean, y'all get why that's important, but I'll spell it out as Gabriela wrote here. You know, we're basically asking the question: are we putting people at risk if they unknowingly register when they're not eligible? Can y'all speak to that?
Yes. So you don't want to register to vote if you're not eligible to do it. You certainly do not want to vote if you're not eligible to do it. I believe it's like a class 5 felony if you vote when you're not eligible. And here's the thing: when you go to register, they don't know. You can have someone who's ineligible, and they can go down there, they can register to vote, they get their golden ticket, says, yep, stamp of approval, go ahead, vote your heart out. And they can't, and it's a felony if they go to that polling place, if they go and vote. So that's very important. So that's a great thing to point out. If you are unsure about your record, and you're a little bit uncomfortable, you kind of do it yourself and try to find it online, and you're like, I'm still unsure here. Call us, email us. We're more than happy to help people like that. Because you'd be surprised, these things happen when people are younger. I just had a veteran, call me and she's talking about things that happened years and years and years ago. And she's like, I don't know where to start. And so we can help you through that. If you have questions like that of, I just don't know what I was convicted of, or if I was convicted. A lot of people are in that scenario. So definitely you want to be sure. And if that's the case, find your disposition records, whichever way you can.
And I just want to, and I'll take the minute just to re-point out, if anyone didn't join us before and is joining us now, we're talking about the automatic restoration of rights. Tim brought up, I think Gabrielle brought up this really good point of what if they don't know they vote? The onus is on you, and it's if you have one conviction and it's your first time, one charge. So if there's multiple charges and it's your first time offense, just to be 100% clear, that does not qualify for the automatic restoration of rights. It has to be one felony, and it's got to be your first time. That's
I appreciate you clarifying that, Steve. We did have to deliver some bad news to someone who asked earlier today about that. It was these were his first convictions. They might have even all been under the same case number, but because they were multiple felonies, unfortunately, and even though his sentence was long ago ended, sadly, he does not qualify for automatic rights restoration because there were multiple convictions under the same case number.
Yeah, and Tim and I were talking about it today, and just how public policy-wise, that doesn't make any sense.
Of course not.
They're not looking at the seriousness of the crime or anything like that. They're looking at the number that you were actually convicted of. I mean, people don't know that when they're taking plea agreements and they're getting into this sort of thing. So this is definitely something that we're going to have to get together and look at next session.
Absolutely.
And if you're in that situation, don't give up there. You can file the application.
Yeah,
it'll take 4 months, and the next time around, you'll be able to vote as long as that's granted.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, Tim. Also, yeah, we do want to emphasize to folks, if you don't qualify for automatic rights restoration, start the process now. It's highly unlikely that you're going to be able to get your rights restored within the next 14 days, I guess, and be able to register and all that. Nonetheless, we want to make sure that you do get your rights restored and that you are eligible to vote in the next election. And it's not just every 4 years. There are, local, county, municipal elections that are so important to what happens in our communities. So please, even if you don't qualify for automatic rights restoration, please start the process now. Also, I'm going to go ahead and post here the contact information once again for Steve and Tim. So here you go. Again, for Steve Charbonneau, it's Stephen@rosensteinlawgroup.com. For Tim Hinsey, that's Tim@rosensteinlawgroup.com. You can call them at 480-248-7666 if you have questions. So there you go.
Yeah, and also if some people can get online, get the application, and fly through it no problem. But a lot of people that have multiple convictions, or maybe they had a really bad past, and now they had multiple different offenses and different dates of violation, it can get daunting. So we're here for you for that too. If you need help with it, and it's not something you can fly through yourself, give us a call, send us an email, and we do this stuff all the time. So we're willing to do that. But there is an application that's a self-service application on the Maricopa County website. Well, all the counties have them on their websites, and we'd be happy to point you to those too.
Absolutely.
I want to share one last comment from Gabriella. Love that you're here joining us, Gabriella. I really appreciate it. Her comment is, this is a topic that's extremely important to her and impacts so many Arizonans. She says, I'm also interested in changing the culture around how we view the rights of people with felonies. We've acknowledged that Arizona is part of the prison industrial complex and that Black and brown people are being targeted, then charged with longer and harsher sentences than their counterparts. But not many people recognize how much that impacts our representation. I personally couldn't agree more. I really appreciate that. And I want to thank all of you who joined us for this Facebook Live. Definitely want to thank Stephen Charbonneau and Tim Hinsey of Rosenstein Law Group. Thanks so much, you guys. Really, really, really appreciate your expertise and the time you invested doing this.
Thanks for all you do, Joe. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free. Even if it's, hey, I don't know if I'm eligible, call us, email us, and we'll walk you through it.
And get out the vote.
Get out
All
the
right.
vote.
Absolutely.
All right, folks. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Take care.